You know, before we start talking, I want to know about some highlights from your trip. What did you love about our time in the UK?
I mean, I love the whole thing. There's not like a day where I was like, oh, that was boring.
Even the boring days.
What day was boring?
There were some where we spent a lot of time in the cabin at the cottage, but it was so nice, so quiet out there in the countryside.
Yeah. Um, a highlight was we got to be part of, I guess we were kind of part of it, a magic, no, it's not a magic show. What is it called?
Mentalism.
Mentalism.
Yeah.
Gerard Senahi, who's like, he's been on like every talk show and he's like a famous mentalist. He had both of our kids in his part of his show, and we got to see him perform his like very up close magic, which is just totally mind blowing. He bends spoons with his mind, and my son, our son, not just mine,
Yours too.
mine too. He has not stopped talking about Gerard. Like he really is so into magic and so into like possibilities in the world. And I just love how Gerard teaches like spiritual principles through mentalism, which is very neat.
Yeah,
So
that's
thank you,
cool.
Gerard. We love you. And just for teaching our kids about what could be possible.
hmm It's good stuff. So today we're going to talk about, let's see, I don't know how to tie it into mentalism, although I guess it would be if you were to uh, be a telepath, if you were to be able to read somebody's mind, that you would not need today's episode.
Yes,
Um,
if you're telepathic, you can skip it.
just go right ahead, get on with your day. But
You
if
might still need it actually. Just because you can read a mind doesn't mean you can control other people.
true, this episode is for you if you've ever been bulldozed by somebody, not literally, but like, with in a conversation, in some kind of communication through a decision process. If you felt like somebody uh, is not taking your presence into consideration and just is talking over you, treating you poorly, what do you do? What do you do? Especially if you are a leader in an organization and this is coming from a peer, even a direct report. They can sometimes do this in meetings. If you're a coach and a client is doing this, um, sometimes we don't know what to do. And we've done a lot of thinking about this. It actually came up in one of our training sessions today for the Superbound Coach training program. So we're going to unpack it. What are some creative responses? What are some empowering responses to feeling like you're being bulldozed?
So I always take the approach, or I try to, because I'm still a human. Sometimes when I feel like I'm being bulldozed, I just want to go, ah, stop it to the person I'm talking to or who's talking at me. But I think when I am well rested and really in a grounded position with myself, which happens sometimes, the very first approach I take is to look at my own static about what is happening. When I was a brand new coach, I had some clients who really just like wanted to vent, they wanted to talk, they kind of thought that maybe coaching was a lot like some talk therapy that perhaps that they had done where like I know there are forms of support out there where 90% of the time it is the other person speaking and the practitioner, whoever they may be, um, maybe asks a question or two, but they just like let someone talk for 45 minutes. That is not how I coach. And it would kind of like, I would get a little panicked because I'd be like, they're all over the place and they're told me 10 different problems and I have no idea what to focus on. And something that I sort of learned over the years was to really check in with myself and kind of put it in the context of what was situationally appropriate. Steve and I work with a lot of leaders and a lot of professionals, a lot of folks who often, when they are feeling static, when they are having an emotional response to something, they can't often respond from that place. They have to like stuff their emotions down. They can't say what they really think, or they have to like really veil it in a lot of sophisticated language that's appropriate for the moment. They may have to hide their reaction entirely in order to keep a brave face for the rest of their team. What I realized was the more that I was working with those people, the more I felt like, actually, this is a safe space. As the coach, I'm creating a safe space for this person to actually say without censorship what they really feel and think. And I found out that that can be very healing for some people. That can be really supportive. Now, it doesn't mean that I sit there and let my clients vent for hours on end, but it does mean that when I sense that someone just needs to say the truth of what they're experiencing in the moment, I try not to cut that off. Where I stop, where I feel like, okay, this person is maybe not bulldozing me, but like they're this feeling and their emotions are taking over the session in a way that's not helpful, is when I look for when someone starts to repeat themselves, when they start to say the same thing over and over again. Then I'm like, okay, we're bulldozing ourselves straight into the ground here. And that is when I interject or intervene.
You bring up a couple interesting things. One is the idea of bulldozing is often as harmful for the bulldozer as the perceived bulldozee, right?
Yes.
That, you know, if someone is failing to communicate well, that it's as harmful for them potentially as it is for you. And it's usually our own static that has us feeling personally affronted by it. Like, why aren't you leaving room for my glorious insights? Well, because they're in pain. There's something happening for them. They're not seeing you, right? There's a lack of connection on their side as well. So I love how you point out being present with your own static about it is is important. And then also the thread of as a coach, you're not always there to solve someone's problem. You're there to create an experience of coming home for themselves, of finding a place in this world where they can feel completely welcome, completely at ease, and working on the things that matter the most to them. And so, as a coach, which also applies if you're a mentor, a leader, someone who has trust invested in them, it's important to notice, do we make space for someone to feel at home, feel welcome, feel heard? Or is this the moment to offer some support? And I love the rule of thumb with, if they start repeating themselves, this might be the moment to jump in. But some people, as a coach or as a leader, the moment a problem comes up, they're like, okay, let's do some surgery, folks. And that might not be the most welcoming embrace for that moment.
Yeah, that is true. And it's a skill. It's something we work on a lot in our certification program, and something that all of the Superbound coaches are constantly refining and finding their own style with their clients and the people on their team. So it's not something that you necessarily are going to just like pick up once after listening to this podcast, but another sort of way in is notice, what's your kind of style of reaction when you feel you're being bulldozed. There are people who remain quiet and they just let the other person keep going, and they just kind of go inside of themselves and don't respond, don't intervene. They don't feel like, oh, I can't say anything. And there's others who will, as you said, Steve, like jump in right away and get to problem solving. It's good to notice what your tendency is, because very often our like natural tendency is a defense mechanism for our own awkwardness. You know, if you are a person who has to solve the problem, it's because you can't probably sit with someone who's in pain. I had a post about this, like responding to people who share a struggle with you. The natural tendency that you have is very often about you and not about them. So recognizing what that is. And then if you really feel like you're being bulldozed, and maybe you're not in a coaching position with this person, maybe it's someone who is a colleague who is talking over you or pushing past you or cutting you off, and it's become maybe a habitual thing that you notice, I'm going to offer you something that you might not like here.
It's our job as coaches.
You're probably not going to like hearing it. It is your job, for your best interest, for your vision, for your lanterns, for the sake of this working relationship you have with this other person, to take a good hard look at how you have contributed to a dynamic where someone feels like they can bulldoze you, where someone feels like they can cut you off, talk over you, push you, not consider your opinion. And there's a way to do this where some people will hear that and they'll be like, it's all my fault and I'm a terrible person and I've created this dynamic and I deserve to be bulldozed. That is not all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that sometimes what happens, we've seen this a lot with folks that have had, not knocking general mindset coaching, because mindset coaching is great, but sometimes what happens, which is a little different from how we coach as superabound coaches, is people will say, I'm going to work on my mindset by thinking a better thought so that I can be okay in the presence of whatever behavior is happening around me, or in the presence of a culture that I'm not a big fan of here at my workplace. What we try to do as superabound coaches with our clients is teach them to actually honor the feelings that are coming up. As in our book, we talk about this a lot, as sort of an alarm bell to something that is not in line with your vision or your lantern. So when you feel like you're being cut off or bulldozed, and it makes you react in a way that's tense, the solution is not to make that okay in your own mind. Because when you make it okay in your own mind, you're actually just telling the other people who are bulldozing you that this behavior is totally fine with me. You're creating it. You are actually actively contributing to a dynamic where you will be bulldozed in that relationship forever because the other person's just fine. And you appear on the surface to be just fine too.
And that kind of shift is actually, it's a form of violence against yourself, because it's taking your reaction and you're judging it as like, this is not okay. It's a form of self-loathing in a way, saying this reaction is not welcome. I need to change it in order to fill in the blank, in order to get along, to get promoted, to do the right thing, and anything there, you're choosing that at the expense of your own self.
You're bulldozing you.
The tables have turned. How interesting. And that's not to say that whatever reaction you have needs to be acted out of. We're not saying, okay, maybe if you get silent, you should start,
the table over and saying, this is bullshit.
Table flipping.
Maybe probably don't do that.
We're not advocating table flips. But what we are saying is that there is wisdom in that response, because it can fuel how you want to collaborate with that person, how you want to approach, whatever topic it is that you're working out around the on the email thread or around the discussion table. There is something very important in that. And maybe it's only important for your own kind of healing and integration process over time, but it matters because you matter and it is a real response. So rather than, working with your coach to change your mind so that you can be okay with this bullshit that's happening,
See
spend
what
some
wisdom the
time.
bullshit has for you.
Yeah.
What is the bullshit teaching you? What is the bullshit alerting you to within yourself?
Yeah.
To put
That's
it
the source of real
politely.
empowerment.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the source of empowerment. And we share all of this, again, not as a source, not as a way to blame the victim, but as a way to discover your real empowerment that goes beyond, hey, let me think differently about this crummy situation. It's actually, how do I embrace this whole thing? How have I co-created this? And what do I want to transform it into?
Yeah, because we are always teaching people how to treat us. And so if you only ever work out your feelings inside of you and try to like find a way of thinking pretty, think pretty thoughts. If you only ever do that, you are actually contributing to a status quo that is only going to like upset you again on Monday. So, well, you don't need to get into table flipping. One of the things that can be really useful, even if you're not in a coaching mentorship relationship with someone, is I'm going to share this question because this came up and I offered this to some folks in our certification program, and I think it's valuable, is actually talking with the person who you feel is bulldozing you at a time when your nervous system is not activated and just saying, here is what I noticed. Here's the facts of what I noticed happened in this meeting. You talked over me. You, or not even that, maybe even more specific and less dramatic. You could say, when I was sharing this in the presentation, you interrupted, you started going on a different track, which took us off topic. I didn't get to finish my presentation or make the case I had for this idea. And I've noticed this happens often. Several other occasions I can mention are this, this, and this. I want to know how we have created a dynamic where you feel comfortable interrupting me, interrupting my presentations, not letting me finish an idea, because that dynamic doesn't work for me. It's not helping me light the lanterns that we're both supposed to be lighting here. And I'd like to change it, but I can't do that without you. It's actually coming to the table in a collaborative way where you are not saying, hey, you did this to me and you're a bad person. It's owning your side of the street, saying, I clearly in some way indicated that this kind of way of us interacting was okay with me, but I want to let you know it isn't, and I want to change it. So it's being proactive, it's being powerful, it's taking ownership for whatever you've contributed to the dynamic without blaming the other person or shaming yourself or any of that kind of interpersonal static that often happens in relationships.
And I think you hit on some really important points there. And that's it's best not to respond to these things when you're feeling activated.
If you can help it, often a good idea.
Right? So even if it's just taking a deep breath, taking a drink of water, something to kind of ground yourself and bring you back to,
your body,
yeah,
home base.
bring you back to home base. If you need to respond in the moment, those would be some ways to do it. If you can respond later, that might be the best way as well. But when you do, approaching it in a collaborative way with the facts on the table rather than your interpretation of the facts, because even you're bulldozing me, you're talking over me.
Yeah.
That's blanket, that's accusatory. It's not, when I shared this idea, I didn't finish it because you said
You
these
stopped
things.
me mid-sentence. This is what you said. Yeah, that is really, really helpful. I just interrupted him. Did I bulldoze you?
No, this is a collaborative conversation. And so, as with anything, there's no cure, but if this is something that you find happens a lot and you find yourself activated often, this will be a good question to hold. I often work with people on like, what is the powerful question that you can hold for the next period of time that will help you unlock something important in your leadership and in your business? And so if this is something that really resonates with you, the question could be, how am I contributing to this process? And what energy am I bringing to transform it?
Yeah.
Oftentimes, your own reaction to the experience of being bulldozed contains the seed of the energy that you need to communicate and collaborate with people in a different way.
And I'll offer one more question that you could journal about and really think about when you're taking time between feeling reactive and, wanting to have that conversation and change a relationship dynamic is, how would I like this relationship to go? Sometimes that is something you can also share with the other person. You can say, I really want a positive, collaborative working relationship with you, but I feel like there's this blockage because when I present, you often interject and I don't get to finish my ideas. And I want to change that dynamic because I think it's really blocking us from having this relationship that I envision. You can do this with your coworkers, you can do this with your family members. It is really, really powerful. And I will acknowledge that if you've not done this before, especially if you're a person who just kind of holds it in and silences yourself, it's going to feel uncomfortable. But I promise you, 1 or 2 conversations after you've done this a few times, you will understand that it's much more uncomfortable to let the dynamic keep going and let that resentment and bulldozed feeling continue, because that is actually not only affecting your relationship with the other person, it's you affecting your relationship with yourself. It's you tolerating behavior that doesn't exemplify your own worth and contribution to the world. So if not for the sake of the relationship with the other person, do it for you. Do the uncomfortable thing for you. And of course, if you need help with this, this is why Superabound exists. This is why we coach. We have our certification, which will teach you how to be a confident and amazing coach and leader. And we have private one-on-one coaching options where you can work with us and have your own coach to support you and make sure that you don't get bulldozed without your permission.
Yeah. So you can learn more about the one-on-one coaching at besuperabound.com/consultation, where it includes a free visionary meeting where you actually take some time to tune in to the future version of yourself that is transforming these relationships from feeling bulldozed to actually feeling empowered. And then we'll come up with some ideas for how we can go from here to there. That's really the purpose of that conversation. We have several of those available. So I'd love to see you there if that resonates with you.
And if you're interested in coach certification, you can find out more about that at besuperabound.com/certification.
Thanks for listening. We'll
Take
talk to
care.
you again.